have always defined life by what we can see, measure, and understand. But in the deepest trenches of our world, something has been evolving beyond our definitions, waiting for us to look close enough to question everything we thought we knew about consciousness itself. The research vessel Chimera cuts through dark waters above an unnamed trench. Dr. Elias Moreau stands at the observation window, watching the last of the twilight fade from the surface. His team represents the peak of human scientific achievement. Xenobiologists, marine engineers, deep-sea specialists, all gathered to validate his theories about extremophile life. But theories are made at the surface. Down there, in pressures that would crush steel, something waits. At this depth, we still understand the rules. Cells follow predictable patterns. DNA behaves as expected. Life, no matter how strange, fits within our framework. Drop another 2,000 meters, and those rules begin to bend. We are approaching the Hadal Zone now, where the ocean floor splits open into abyssal trenches. Moreau has spent 15 years predicting what lies in this darkness, mapping theoretical organisms that could survive where no light has ever reached. But there is a difference between predicting life and encountering it, between observing from a distance and looking close enough to see it looking back. The submersible descends. Its lights pierce water that hasn't seen photons in millions of years. And there, suspended in the crushing black, the cameras capture something immense, something translucent, something that should not exist. This is the moment Moreau has dreamed of, the discovery that will cement his legacy. He doesn't yet know that discovery has two edges, that zooming in reveals more than size and structure, that the closer you look at some things, the more they look back at you. Dr. Elias Moreau had built his career on being right when others were wrong. At 47, he had 3 books to his name, a professorship at Woods Hole, and a reputation for theoretical precision that bordered on arrogance. He earned that reputation by predicting the existence of thermophilic bacteria in volcanic vents 2 years before anyone found them, by mapping theoretical ecosystems in places no human had ever reached. This trench would be his masterpiece. The Chimera's engines thrummed beneath his feet as he studied the bathymetric maps spread across the lab table. The trench showed as a dark slash on the ocean floor, a wound in the earth that dropped nearly 7 miles down. No submersible had ever touched its deepest point. No sonar had fully mapped its walls. "We're holding position, Doctor," Captain Sarah Holt's voice crackled through the intercom. "The ROV is ready for deployment on your order." Moreau didn't answer immediately. He traced the trench's outline with one finger, following the ridge where tectonic plates pulled apart like a slowly opening mouth. Somewhere down there, in crushing darkness and impossible pressure, his theory waited to be proven. A new paradigm of life. Organisms that didn't just survive in extreme conditions, but thrived in them, evolved for them, existed in forms that would rewrite biology textbooks. "Dr. Moreau?" Holt's voice held a note of impatience. "Deploy the ROV. Let's see what we've been missing." Dr. Neera Cade looked up from her workstation across the lab. She was younger than Moreau by 15 years, a xenobiologist with a specialty in extremophile adaptation. He'd brought her onto the team for her analytical mind, though he found her caution tiresome. "You really think we'll find something down there?" she asked. "This trench isn't near any volcanic activity, no chemosynthetic energy source, nothing to build an ecosystem on." "That's exactly why we'll find something," Moreau said. He rolled up the maps with practiced precision. "Life doesn't wait for ideal conditions, Dr. Cade. It adapts, it evolves, it finds a way. Or it doesn't exist." He met her eyes across the lab. "I didn't come 600 miles into the Pacific to entertain doubt." Through the observation window, the ocean stretched infinite and black. The Chimera floated above an emptiness humans had never touched, a blank space on every map that mattered. In 3 hours, the ROV would reach the trench floor. Its cameras would capture whatever moved in that alien pressure. Its instruments would sample, measure, categorize. Moreau would finally have his proof. He returned to the window, watching the deployment crane lower the ROV into dark water. The submersible's lights grew smaller, fainter, then vanished entirely into the deep. Somewhere below, in the last unexplored place on Earth, something was waiting. He was certain of it. The ROV descended for 2 hours before the readings changed. Moreau had been watching the monitors with the focused intensity of a man who'd staked everything on being proven right. Depth, 4,200 meters. Temperature, 2.1 degrees Celsius. Oxygen levels barely registering. All exactly as predicted. The trench walls slid past the camera in monotonous gray stone, occasionally interrupted by the pale ghost of a deep-sea fish. Then the biosensor spiked. What was that? Cade moved closer to her screen, fingers dancing across the keyboard. I'm getting an energy signature. Organic, but the density is all wrong. Moreau leaned over her shoulder. The graph showed a sudden bloom of bioluminescent activity, except the wavelength didn't match any known organism. Too concentrated, too organized. Equipment malfunction? Captain Holt suggested from the doorway. Run diagnostics, Moreau said, his voice tight. Cade's fingers flew. 30 seconds passed. Senses are functioning normally. This is real. She looked up at him, her expression uncertain. But it doesn't match anything in the database. The energy output is massive for this depth. How massive? Like a whale. But the signature is diffused across a wide area, not concentrated in a single organism. She pulled up another screen, and it's not moving. It's just sitting there at 5,800 meters. Moreau felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was exactly the kind of anomaly he'd predicted. Life that operated on principles science hadn't categorized yet. Take the ROV down to investigate. Doctor, we haven't mapped the trench walls below 5,000 meters, Holt said. If the ROV gets caught on an outcropping, then we lose a machine, Moreau interrupted. We're not here to play it safe, Captain. Holt's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Your expedition. The ROV began its descent again. Moreau watched the depth counter roll higher. 5,000 meters, 5,400. The signal grew stronger with every meter, pulsing on Cade's screen like a heartbeat. It's responding to us, Cade said quietly. What? The energy signature. It's fluctuating in rhythm with the ROV's lights. She enhanced the graph, overlaying the ROV's strobe pattern. The correlation was unmistakable. Almost like it's reacting or communicating. The lab fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the distant groan of the ship's hull. Through the observation window, the ocean was a wall of absolute black. Moreau stared at the screen, watching the signal pulse and fade, pulse and fade. In his entire career, he'd never seen anything like this. Bioluminescence was common in the deep sea, but bioluminescence reactive, coordinated across such a wide area? Depth 5,750 meters, the computer announced, approaching signal source. The camera feed showed nothing but darkness and drifting particulate matter, but the biosensor was screaming now, the readings climbing higher than they'd been since deployment. Something was down there. Something big. The ROV's lights swept across empty water. Then something moved at the edge of the frame. Wait, Cade breathed. Go back. The pilot adjusted the camera angle. For a moment, there was nothing but suspended sediment and darkness. Then the lights caught it again, a shimmer of translucent green, vast and impossible, hanging in the water like a living cathedral. My God, Captain Holt whispered. The creature defied immediate comprehension. It was immense, easily 30 meters across, its body a gossamer membrane that rippled with bioluminescent patterns. Long, spindly appendages extended from its central mass, too delicate to be called limbs, too purposeful to be mere tentacles. They drifted in the current like the branches of some alien willow tree. Moreau couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This was beyond anything he'd theorized, beyond anything in the scientific literature. The creature's translucent body revealed internal structures that pulsed with green light. Not organs exactly, but something else. Networks, systems, a geometry of life that shouldn't exist at this pressure, in this cold, in this absolute absence of photosynthetic energy. "Are you seeing this?" The ROV pilot's voice cracked with excitement over the comm. "Are you recording?" "Every sensor we have," Cade said. Her hands trembled as she worked the controls. "The bioluminescence alone, this is unprecedented. The surface area to mass ratio makes no sense. It should collapse under its own weight." But it didn't collapse. It hung there in the water column, serene and impossible, its appendages moving with a grace that suggested intelligence, or at least awareness. "Move closer," Morrow managed. His voice didn't sound like his own. "I want a full visual survey." The ROV crept forward. The creature didn't react, didn't flee. It simply existed, its translucent body catching the lights and throwing them back in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost designed. "Doctor, the energy signature is off the scale now. Whatever powers this thing, it's not chemosynthesis. It's not anything we understand." Moreau barely heard her. He was watching the internal structures pulse and flow, watching the way light moved through the creature's body like data through fiber optics. This wasn't just a new species. This was a new category of life entirely. "We need samples," he whispered. "Tissue, if possible. Water samples from its immediate vicinity. I want everything." Behind him, he heard Holt making the call to the rest of the crew, heard the excited voices responding, people rushing to the lab to see what they'd found. The chimera came alive with the electricity of discovery, the pure joy of encountering something humanity had never seen before. Moreau pressed his hand against the monitor, as if he could touch the creature through the screen. "There you are. I knew you were down here." On the monitor, the vast translucent form pulsed with green light, beautiful and strange and utterly beyond comprehension. His masterpiece. The sampling arm extended with mechanical precision, its blade gleaming in the ROV's lights. Moreau watched the screen with the intensity of a surgeon making the first incision, aware that this single moment would define everything that followed. "Approaching the specimen's lower appendage," the pilot reported, "positioning for extraction." The creature hadn't moved in the 30 minutes since they'd begun preparations. It simply floated there, its translucent body rippling with those strange internal patterns. Moreau had counted 17 distinct bioluminescent pulses, each one following the last in a rhythm that suggested purpose. But purpose was something they'd determine in the lab, under the microscope, where mysteries became data. "Execute sample collection," he ordered. The blade touched the creature's membrane. There was a moment of resistance, then the tissue gave way. A small section separated cleanly, drifting in the water like a fragment of stained glass. The collection chamber sealed around it with a soft click. "Sample acquired," the pilot said, his voice triumphant. "Chamber sealed and pressurized." The creature didn't react. No recoil, no defensive posture. It simply continued its slow drift through the abyss, apparently unbothered by the intrusion. "Fascinating," Cade murmured. "No pain response. Either it doesn't have nociceptors, or it processes sensation differently than any organism we know." "We'll find out soon enough," Moreau said. He was already moving toward the equipment locker, pulling out sample containers and preparation tools. "Bring the ROV up. I want that tissue on a slide within the hour." The ascent took 90 minutes. Moreau spent every second of it preparing the lab, setting up the electron microscope, calibrating the spectrometer, arranging his instruments with the care of a priest preparing an altar. This was what he lived for, the moment when the unknown became known, when the chaos of discovery crystallized into understanding. When the sample chamber finally arrived, he handled it like it contained the secrets of creation itself. "Careful," Cade warned as he opened the seal. "We don't know if it's toxic or if there's any kind of—" "It survived at 5,800 meters of pressure," Moreau interrupted, transferring the tissue to a sterile container. "I think we can handle it at sea level." The specimen was even more remarkable up close. The membrane shimmered with an iridescence that shifted as he moved it, revealing layers of structure within structure. He placed a fragment on a slide and positioned it under the microscope. "Just cells," he said, adjusting the focus. "Complex, yes. Unusual, absolutely. But cells nonetheless. DNA, proteins, cellular membranes. It all has to follow the same fundamental rules." Cade leaned over her own microscope, silent for a long moment. "Elias," she said finally, "you should see this." "In a minute. I'm cataloging the cellular—" "Now," she insisted, "because these cells aren't following any rules I recognize." Moreau looked up from his microscope, seeing uncertainty in her expression where there should have been wonder.
No one spoke. The bridge had become a tomb of soft electronic hums and the distant creak of the ship's hull. On every screen, the creature hung suspended in the darkness below, its translucent form oriented upward like a vast eye staring at the surface, at them. Moreau couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the single terrible understanding that had crystallized in his mind. They were not the observers. They had never been the observers. "Doctor," Holt's voice was barely above a whisper, "what do we do?" He had no answer. For the first time in his career, in his life, he had no answer. Every certainty he'd built his reputation on had collapsed in the span of 6 hours. Life was categorizable. Intelligence required brains, neurons, centralized processing. Consciousness was the domain of complex organisms with evolutionary histories written in stone and bone. But 3,000 meters below, something conscious existed without any of those requirements. Something that thought with cells instead of neurons. Something that had been waiting in the abyss for millions of years, evolving in directions humanity couldn't conceive of, operating on principles that made a mockery of everything he knew. "We should destroy the sample," Cade said. Her voice shook. "If it knows we took tissue, if that's why it's—" "It won't matter." Moreau heard himself speaking as if from a great distance. "The damage is done. We found it. We cut into it. We put it under a microscope and studied it like a specimen." "So what? It forgives us? It understands scientific curiosity?" The pilot's laugh was brittle with hysteria. "That thing down there is smart enough to coordinate activity across its entire body, smart enough to send a part of itself to watch us. What does something like that do when it's been violated?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Moreau thought of the cellular patterns forming circuits in the lab, thought of the smaller creature with its glowing eyes tilting its head with that terrible knowing gesture, thought of his theories, his books, his certainty that he understood the rules of life. He had understood nothing. "Sir, it's moving again," sonar operator said quietly. The creature was rotating slowly, its appendages spreading wide like fingers opening. The motion was almost gentle, almost curious. On the microscope feed still visible from the lab monitor, the cellular patterns shifted into a new configuration, one that looked disturbingly like a question mark. "It's trying to communicate," Cade breathed. "Or it's deciding whether we're a threat, whether we're worth the effort of responding to." Moreau pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the observation window. Somewhere below, in crushing darkness where no human was meant to venture, an intelligence older than civilization watched and waited and considered the tiny metal shell that had descended into its domain. The observer had become the observed, and he had absolutely no idea what came next. Dawn broke over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold that seemed obscene after the night they'd endured. The creature had descended at 0400 hours, sinking back into the abyss as deliberately as it had risen. It returned to exactly 5,800 meters and resumed its stationary position, as if the entire encounter had been a statement, a message. "We see you too." Moreau sat in the lab, staring at the tissue sample under the microscope. The cells had stopped forming patterns an hour ago. Now they lay scattered across the slide, inert,
and ordinary. Dead, finally. Or perhaps just silent. The rest of the crew had gathered in the mess hall. He could hear their voices through the bulkhead, frightened, angry, confused. Captain Holt was trying to maintain order, but what order was there to maintain? They had sailed to the edge of the map and found something staring back. Cade entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one beside him without a word. "They want to know what we're going to tell people," she said, finally, "when we get back." Moreau lifted his head. Through the observation window, the ocean stretched infinite and unknowable. Beneath that surface, in trenches and abyssal plains humans had barely touched, how many other consciousnesses waited? How many vast, patient intelligences had been evolving while humanity congratulated itself on being the pinnacle of creation? The truth would destroy everything. Every assumption about our place in the world, every comfortable certainty about what constitutes intelligence, awareness, life itself. And the lie? The lie is easier. We found a large bioluminescent invertebrate, unusual physiology, promising research subject, nothing that challenges the paradigm. He laughed, a hollow sound. Nothing that suggests we're children playing in a pool while something incomprehensible watches from the deep end. Cade sipped her coffee, silent for a long moment. What do you want to do? What did he want? He wanted to go back 6 days to the man who believed he understood life, who thought discovery was about cataloging and categorizing, not confronting the limits of human comprehension, who had never looked into glowing green eyes and seen himself reflected back, small and temporary and profoundly insignificant. The sample data, he said slowly, the cellular analysis, the thermodynamic readings, the neural network patterns, all of it is impossible. Peer review would tear it apart. We'd be laughed out of the scientific community. Or we'd start a conversation humanity isn't ready to have. Exactly. Through the window, a whale breached in the distance, its body arcing through morning light before crashing back into the sea. Life as they understood it. Life as they could measure and explain and file away in taxonomic boxes. Below, in the crushing darkness where light had never reached, something else existed. Something that had observed their arrival, tolerated their intrusion, and allowed them to leave. This time. "We tell them we found nothing," Moreau said. "Equipment malfunction, false readings. The Atacama Trench was empty." Cade nodded slowly. "And the truth?" "The truth stays with us." He looked at her, seeing his own transformation reflected in her eyes. The burden of knowing that we're not alone, that we've never been alone, and that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. She raised her coffee cup in a quiet toast. To silence, to secrets, to the terrible wisdom of knowing when to stop looking. In the lab, the tissue sample sat under the microscope, ordinary and dead. 3,000 meters below, something vast and patient resumed its vigil in the dark. If there are other prehistoric ocean creatures and predators you want us to cover, leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video, share to your friends, and subscribe to Lost Titans for more ancient killers and forgotten giants. And if you're ready for more, click the video on screen now. What comes next is mind-blowing.